Throughout our lives, we're always two-sided. We always have both a public and a private identity. On the one hand, we're individuals in the eyes of others. On the other hand, we're capacity for the world. However, we're not always aware of our two-sided nature. There are potentially 4 main stages in our lives, and as we move through these stages, our attention oscillates between our public and our private selves. Sometimes our focus is on one side, sometimes on the other. The 4 main stages of our lives are the baby, the child, the adult, and the seer. In the first stage of the baby, we were unaware of our appearance, unaware of our public identity. We hadn't yet learned to see ourselves through the eyes of others. Conscious only of our own point of view, our private reality, we were faceless, at large, space for the world, without putting it in these or in any terms. In the second stage of the child, we were becoming aware of our public identity. Seeing ourselves more and more through the eyes of others, we began learning to take responsibility for ourselves as individuals. In the process, we began overlooking our private reality. But our attention was inconsistent. Often we would forget about our public identity, completely losing ourselves in whatever we were doing. But as we grew older, these periods of unself-conscious openness and freedom came less often and went more quickly. In the third stage of the adult, we identify profoundly with our public identity. Seeing ourselves as others see us, we're in no doubt at all that we are what we look like. In this stage, we deny the reality of who we really are. It would seem that the price of genuinely becoming a person is the loss of our private self. We may not lose it for long, but lose it we must. Many benefits flow from becoming an individual, but though we may not know it, we're now cut off from our centre and source. It's not surprising if we find ourselves feeling that something isn't quite right, that we're missing something important. Fortunately, this need not be the end of our journey. We can go on to the 4th stage of the seer, where we discover the reality of our private self and begin drawing on its immense healing power. Seeing who we really are at centre, we now begin living a truly balanced, two-sided life. Private as well as public, public as well as private. One of the good things about losing touch with our private self as we grow up is that when we return to it, we see it with fresh eyes. It seems that we have to leave home before we can really appreciate what home is and how wonderful it is. And because our individuality doesn't disappear when we see who we really are, we can now celebrate our one consciousness with many voices. These stages are a map for our individual lives. They are also, in general terms, a map for humanity as a whole. In the distant past, human beings were not very self-conscious. We didn't have a strong idea of being separate from the world around us. More recently, we've become highly conscious of being human, of being apart from other life forms and the planet. However, this view of ourselves is changing. There are many indications that we're moving into the next stage, where we're aware not only of being separate from the world, but also of being capacity for the world. If you're aware now of being capacity for the world, then you're evidence of this change. Hopefully enough of us will awaken quickly enough to affect the general consciousness of humanity. The survival of civilization and life as we know it may depend on this shift in consciousness, on humanity recognizing that in reality it is capacity for other species and for the environment. In this film we've presented a traditional spiritual message in modern terms. The traditional message has been expressed in different ways, depending on time and culture. But one way of putting it is that we're not simply human, we're also divine. If we look steadily within at our divine nature, then our lives will be blessed. In this film we've described this spiritual message in physical terms. We're not at centre what we appear to be from a distance. Rather than asking you to believe this proposition, we've carried out experiments that test it, and then we've explored some of the implications of living consciously from our centre. This modern way of testing this ancient message was developed by the philosopher Douglas Harding. If you'd like to find out more about Douglas, then please visit our website. You'll also find there lots more information about this experimental approach.